I was watching TV with my fiancée when her phone suddenly connected to Bluetooth. A message played out loud. Last night was a mistake. Or was it? She lunged for the remote. Then another message came through. I hope you've already found your fiancé's documents. Otherwise. The night was ordinary in a way that felt earned. The kind of quiet evening people imagine when they talk about settling down. Dinner plates stacked in the sink. The television low but steady. The lights dimmed because Veronica liked them that way, said it made the room feel calmer. I sat on the couch with my feet on the coffee table, half watching some forgettable crime rerun, half scrolling through work emails I had promised myself I would stop answering after 8. Veronica was curled up beside me, her head resting against my shoulder, her phone lying face down on her thigh. She had been restless all evening. Not nervous exactly, but alert in a way I had learned to associate with her when she felt like she was managing too many threads at once. She kept checking the hallway, adjusting the blanket, standing up to get water even though her glass was still half full. I noticed it, filed it away, and told myself not everything needed analysis. Then her phone connected to the Bluetooth speaker. The sound cut through the television without warning. The voice was male, unfamiliar, confident, and entirely out of place in our living room. It carried the casual intimacy of someone who assumed privacy, someone who did not expect an audience. The message referenced the night before and framed it as something that might have been a mistake, or might not have been. The tone was light, almost playful, which made it worse. It was not the sound of guilt. It was the sound of comfort. Veronica reacted before I fully processed what I had heard. She lunged for the remote, nearly knocking over her water. Her movements were sharp and uncoordinated, like her body had jumped ahead of her thoughts. The speaker went silent, but the damage had already settled into the room. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. The television continued playing, unaware of the shift, but the space between us felt suddenly crowded. I turned my head slightly and looked at her. Her face had drained of color, her eyes fixed on the blank screen as if it might somehow correct itself. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her breathing was shallow, quick, controlled badly enough that I noticed. Before she could say anything, the phone chimed again. The second message connected instantly. This one was shorter and colder. It referenced documents. It implied urgency. It suggested consequences if certain things had not already been secured. The voice did not sound concerned. It sounded transactional. Veronica grabbed the phone and shut it off completely, her fingers trembling just enough to give her away. She stood up and paced toward the kitchen, her back to me, speaking too quickly about technical glitches and outdated settings and how Bluetooth sometimes acted up on its own. I let her talk. I did not interrupt. I did not accuse. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask who the man was or why he knew about documents that belonged to me. I sat there and listened, because something in the second message had already rearranged the evening in my head. Documents. Not photos. Not messages. Not secrets of the emotional variety people expect when infidelity surfaces. Documents were practical. Documents were deliberate. Documents required access and time. Veronica returned with a forced smile and suggested we call it a night early. She said she had a headache. She said she would explain everything in the morning. She said all the right things in the wrong order. I nodded and told her that was fine. She went to the bedroom and closed the door. I stayed on the couch for another 10 minutes, long enough to confirm that she was not coming back out. When I finally stood, the apartment felt unfamiliar, like a place staged to look like home. I walked down the hallway and stopped in front of the filing cabinet built into the wall near my office. It was the one Veronica had insisted on organizing when we moved in. She had said she was better with paperwork. She had said it would be easier if everything was in one place. She had said she wanted us to feel like a team. I opened the cabinet. At first glance, everything looked normal. Color-coded folders, clean labels, insurance, property, employment, banking. I pulled out the employment folder and flipped through it slowly. Several envelopes were missing. I checked the banking folder next. The outer folder was intact, but inside, statements were thinner than they should have been. Pages had been removed carefully, not ripped out, not damaged. Someone had taken their time. I felt a tightening in my chest, not panic, but clarity. I closed the cabinet and went into my office, turning on the desk lamp instead of the overhead light. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. Everything looked fine on the surface. No strange charges. No transfers. No alerts. That was what bothered me most. If this had been impulsive, there would have been mistakes. If this had been emotional, there would have been sloppiness. Instead, everything felt staged, measured, waiting for the right moment. I checked my email next. I searched for messages from my bank, my employer, my insurance provider. Several notifications showed as read on days when I knew I had been working 12-hour shifts and had not checked my inbox until late at night. Someone had accessed them earlier. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, listening to the faint sound of Veronica moving around in the bedroom. Drawers opened and closed softly. Her phone buzzed once, then went silent again. When I finally went to bed, she was already under the covers, turned toward the wall. Her phone was tucked beneath her pillow. I lay there awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the messages in my head without focusing on the words themselves. What mattered was the assumption behind them. The assumption that she was not alone when she listened. The assumption that the documents were already in motion. The assumption that whatever came next had been planned well in advance. Sometime after midnight, I quietly got out of bed and returned to my office. I pulled up the Bluetooth history on the speaker system. The device list was short. One unfamiliar device name stood out, having connected multiple times over the past 2 months during hours when I had been at work. I wrote it down. Then I checked the building's shared storage app, the one residents used to reserve amenities and receive notices. The access log showed Veronica had requested copies of several documents through the management office, citing joint ownership authorization. She had never mentioned it. I returned to bed before sunrise, careful not to wake her. She slept lightly, one hand curled protectively around the phone under her pillow, as if even unconscious she understood it was the thing that could undo her. In the morning, she woke early and rushed through her routine. She avoided my eyes. She spoke cheerfully about errands and deadlines. She kissed my cheek longer than usual, then left the apartment with her bag clutched tightly against her side. I waited until the door closed before moving. I photographed the filing cabinet. I photographed the envelopes. I saved copies of the access logs. I printed statements and placed them in a new folder she did not know existed. By the time she returned that evening, I had already stopped seeing her as my fiancée. I saw her as someone executing a plan that did not include me surviving it intact. And I understood that whatever that man on the Bluetooth speaker thought he knew, he had underestimated how much time I had been given by accident. Once you notice that someone is lying to you, the hardest part is pretending you do not see the rhythm of it everywhere. The pauses grow longer. The explanations arrive early, before questions exist. The body starts moving ahead of the story, as if it needs to stay a step in front of the truth. Veronica became efficient. She left earlier. She came back later. She started keeping her phone on silent, even when she was in the room with me. She stopped asking about my work schedule and instead confirmed it casually, like she already knew the answer but wanted to hear me say it out loud. I played my part without deviation. I complained about deadlines. I mentioned overtime. I complained about traffic. I gave her the predictable version of me that required no attention. Every night she nodded along, already elsewhere. 3 days after the Bluetooth incident, the unfamiliar device appeared again on the speaker system. It connected for less than a second and disconnected immediately, like someone checking whether the door was still unlocked. I took note of the timestamp. It aligned perfectly with the window between my departure for work and Veronica leaving the apartment. Patterns do not need emotion to expose themselves. They only need consistency. During my lunch break that day, I drove to the co-working building listed in the device registry. It was a glass-fronted structure wedged between a real estate office and a private clinic, the kind of place marketed toward freelancers and consultants who needed legitimacy without permanence. I parked across the street and waited. Veronica arrived 20 minutes later. She did not look cautious. She looked familiar with the space, like someone who had walked that sidewalk often enough to stop noticing the cracks. She entered using a keycard and did not look back. I did not follow her inside. I did not need to. The point was no longer discovery. It was confirmation. That afternoon, I accessed my credit report from a public terminal. Nothing had been opened yet, but 2 soft inquiries sat on the record, both tied to mortgage review services. I recognized the firm name immediately. It matched the business card Veronica had brought home months earlier, the one she said came from a consultation she had booked to help us explore refinancing options. I remembered that conversation clearly now, how she had insisted on handling the paperwork, how she had framed it as taking pressure off me, how she had told me I could trust her. Trust, I realized, is most dangerous when it feels efficient. I returned home that evening before Veronica, something I rarely did. I unlocked her laptop using the passcode she had once asked me to set up for her when she forgot it. She had never changed it. The browser history was scrubbed carefully, but not perfectly. Cache pages remained. Calendar entries referenced meetings that did not exist on her shared schedule. Cloud storage showed recent activity tied to a private folder that did not sync to any shared devices. I did not open it yet. Rushing ruins good information. Instead, I copied the metadata, file sizes, modification times, access locations. The pattern repeated itself. Every update happened during my work hours. Every access point matched the co-working building. The man from the messages did not exist in isolation. He was not a mistake. He was infrastructure. The next day, Veronica told me she wanted to push the wedding back. She framed it as stress. She framed it as timing. She framed it as wanting to start our marriage without financial pressure. She suggested transferring certain responsibilities into her name temporarily, just until things stabilized. I agreed. That agreement changed everything. Her relief was immediate. Her posture softened. She leaned into me in a way she had not since before the Bluetooth incident. She believed she had regained control. That night, after she fell asleep, I accessed the private folder. It contained spreadsheets. Not emotional messages. Not declarations. Not fantasies. Spreadsheets with timelines. Asset lists. Risk assessments. Notes tagged with initials I did not recognize at first. JC. The files detailed projected outcomes depending on when the wedding occurred, how long it lasted, and which financial instruments were active at the time of separation. Certain scenarios were highlighted as optimal. Others were marked as volatile. One column was labeled fallback. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum from the kitchen. This was not betrayal in the heat of the moment. This was logistics. The next morning, I called my bank from the car and asked general questions without raising alarms. Hypothetical questions. Clarifications. The kind of conversation that sounds harmless but confirms exactly how exposed you are. Then I called a lawyer recommended by a colleague and scheduled a consultation under the guise of contract review. Preparation is invisible until it is finished. 2 days later, Veronica announced she would be taking a short trip to clear her head. She said she needed space. She said it would be good for both of us. She did not specify where she was going. She packed lightly. The moment she left, I accessed the shared network again and downloaded everything. Every spreadsheet, every draft, every communication log that referenced my identity, my assets, or my employment. I saved them in multiple locations and printed physical copies. I did not alter anything. The truth holds its shape better when untouched. That evening, I received an email from my employer's benefits department asking me to confirm a change request that had been submitted under my name. I did not respond immediately. Instead, I forwarded it to myself from a secure account and flagged it for later. I wanted the attempt documented, not corrected. By the time Veronica returned, she had a different energy. Lighter, more confident. She spoke about the future with a careful optimism that assumed alignment. She did not know the alignment had shifted completely. The unfamiliar Bluetooth device attempted to connect again that night. It failed. I had already disabled external pairing. I watched Veronica's face change when it did not go through. Not panic. Not fear. Calculation. She excused herself and went to the bedroom. Her phone lit up almost immediately. I stayed in the living room, staring at the silent speaker, understanding finally that the man on the other end was not the danger. The danger was the plan that assumed I would remain passive long enough for it to complete itself. And I was already well past that point. Once a plan reaches the point where it depends on silence, the person executing it starts making mistakes. They confuse momentum with control. They assume cooperation where there is only delay. Veronica entered that phase without realizing it. She stopped hiding the structure of her days. She spoke openly about meetings without details. She answered calls in the other room without bothering to lower her voice. She began treating our shared life like a draft she had already revised in her head. The man behind the messages, the one identified by initials instead of emotion, had become bold enough to exist inside her routine. I let it happen. I met with the lawyer on a Wednesday afternoon during what Veronica believed was another overtime shift. I brought printed copies of everything. The spreadsheets, the access logs, the document trails, the partial transfers that had been prepared but not executed. I did not frame it as betrayal. I framed it as exposure. The lawyer did not react emotionally. That told me everything. He explained what had already been attempted. He explained what would have happened if I had signed the wrong thing at the wrong time. He explained how clean the separation could be if I moved first and how damaging it could become if I waited. I asked one question before leaving. How fast? The answer was not reassuring, but it was clear. Speed would decide who absorbed the damage. That night, Veronica suggested we open a joint investment account to stabilize our finances while we figured things out. She had rehearsed the explanation. I could hear it in the pacing, the way she presented benefits before risks, the way she spoke as if the conclusion had already been reached. I agreed again. Her relief was visible. She leaned into me on the couch and talked about the future with certainty, already building a narrative that no longer required my participation beyond compliance. The unfamiliar Bluetooth device attempted to connect later that evening. It failed again. Veronica frowned at the speaker, then at her phone. She did not comment. She simply adjusted the blanket and moved closer. I stayed still. The next morning, I contacted my employer's HR department and requested an in-person review of my benefits profile. I framed it as a routine audit prompted by upcoming life changes. I brought identification. I brought copies. I brought documentation. They showed me the change request Veronica had attempted to submit. Some had gone through partially. Others were flagged for verification. None had been finalized. That window mattered. By the end of the meeting, my account access credentials were reset. Notification preferences were updated. Third-party authorization was revoked. The HR representative printed confirmation and asked me to sign. I signed slowly. From there, I went to the bank. I did not accuse. I asked questions. I referenced hypothetical scenarios that matched the spreadsheets exactly. The advisor's expression shifted as the picture assembled itself. Joint accounts were reviewed. Temporary holds were placed. Transfer thresholds were adjusted. Alerts were rerouted. Nothing dramatic happened at that moment. That was the point. When Veronica returned home that evening, she noticed the shift immediately. She asked casually if I had changed something with the accounts. I said yes. I told her I wanted clarity before making any new commitments. She smiled, but her jaw tightened. She nodded as if that made sense, then excused herself to the bedroom. Her phone vibrated repeatedly within minutes. I could hear her pacing. An hour later, she returned calmer, composed again, carrying the confidence of someone who believed contingencies were still intact. She told me the trip had helped. She said she felt closer to me. She suggested we focus on rebuilding trust slowly. Trust, she said, like it was a material you could ration. That night, I accessed the cloud folder again. A new file had been added while I was at the bank. It was titled Contingency Update. The document outlined a revised timeline. It assumed delays. It adjusted risk exposure. It noted that Andrew appeared cautious but manageable. My name appeared repeatedly. I copied it. The following day, I requested copies of every document Veronica had submitted on my behalf through the building management office. The administrator hesitated, then complied after reviewing the authorization language carefully. Several forms had been altered subtly. Dates adjusted. Language softened. Responsibilities shifted. The intent was clear. That afternoon, I finally researched the man behind the initials. Julian Cross. He operated under a consulting firm registered less than 2 years earlier. His licensing history showed gaps. Name changes. Associations that dissolved quietly. He had a history of involvement in transactions that ended with disputes, never charges. Clean enough to function. Dirty enough to profit. Veronica was not his first attempt. That realization did not comfort me. It sharpened my focus. I arranged a second meeting with my lawyer and forwarded everything new. The contingency update. The altered forms. The attempted benefit changes. This time, the lawyer spoke first. He said the plan depended on one thing above all else. My continued belief that reconciliation was possible. That belief was gone. 2 days later, Veronica received a notification that a transfer request had failed. She tried again. It failed again. She confronted me directly for the first time since the Bluetooth incident. She asked why the accounts were locked. I told her we needed to talk about transparency before moving forward. I told her I wanted everything on the table. She stared at me, measuring what I knew and how much time she had left. She chose partial truth. She admitted to working with a consultant. She framed it as protection. She framed it as preparation in case things went wrong between us. She framed it as something she did for both of us. I let her finish. Then I asked about the spreadsheets. The color drained from her face. I asked about the contingency plans. She sat down slowly. I asked about Julian. She said nothing. That silence was louder than anything the Bluetooth speaker had ever played. I told her I needed space. I told her I was staying elsewhere for a few nights to think. I packed a bag calmly while she watched, her control unraveling in stages. She tried to speak. She tried to redirect. She tried to reframe. I left without engaging. From the hotel room that night, I finalized the remaining steps. Account separation, legal notices, employment confirmations, asset protection filings. By the time Veronica understood that the plan she had built no longer belonged to her, it was already too late to reclaim it. And the man she trusted to guide her had stopped responding entirely. Because plans built on someone else's inaction fail the moment that assumption breaks. And mine had broken days ago. The first notice arrived the morning after I left the apartment. It was not dramatic. It was not emotional. It was procedural, which made it far more effective. Veronica received confirmation that joint accounts had been formally restricted pending review, accompanied by a request for documentation she no longer controlled. She called me 3 times before noon. I did not answer. The second notice arrived that afternoon. This one came from the property management office. Access privileges were adjusted. Authorization records were updated. Requests submitted under joint approval now required dual verification. Veronica drove to the office in person. They turned her away. That evening, she appeared at my hotel unannounced. I watched her through the lobby camera before deciding whether to go down. She looked composed at first, rehearsed, carrying herself the way someone does when they believe persuasion is still available. When the front desk told her they could not connect her call to my room, she lost that composure. I did not intervene. By the time I returned to the room, she was gone, but the message she left with the clerk was clear enough. She wanted to talk. She wanted to fix things. She wanted to explain. Explanations only matter when timing still exists. The next step unfolded quietly. My lawyer submitted formal notices documenting unauthorized document handling and attempted financial misrepresentation. The language was careful. It did not accuse. It outlined facts. It attached evidence. Julian Cross received his copy the same day. He responded within hours. His reply was brief, defensive, and poorly structured. He denied involvement, claimed limited consultation, and requested that all communication go through counsel. That response triggered something far larger than he anticipated. The licensing board overseeing his work opened an inquiry automatically once they received the documentation. His firm's insurance carrier requested clarification. His employer initiated an internal audit. Momentum does not require emotion. It requires alignment. Veronica learned about Julian's silence the next morning. She called him repeatedly. She emailed. She tried secondary numbers she had saved under unrelated names. None of them connected. That was when she finally understood that the plan she had built relied on someone who vanished at the first sign of risk. She returned to the apartment and began packing aggressively. Not to leave, but to reclaim control. She assumed she could separate assets physically even if she could not move them financially. She was wrong. A courier arrived while she was there, delivering legal notices requiring the preservation of documents and devices. She called me immediately after receiving them. This time I answered. I did not argue. I did not accuse. I told her the engagement was over. I told her communication would continue through counsel. I told her she needed to stop attempting contact outside that framework. She tried to negotiate. I ended the call. 2 days later, Julian's firm suspended him pending investigation. His professional profiles disappeared from public directories within hours. Clients distanced themselves quietly. Associates removed their names from shared records. The silence he had relied on became total. Veronica attempted damage control with friends and family. She framed the situation as a misunderstanding. She suggested stress had caused poor decisions. She implied mutual fault without specifics. The narrative did not hold. People asked questions. Documents surfaced. Timelines did not align. Her explanations changed depending on the audience. Credibility eroded quickly. The final step occurred a week later. The bank concluded its review. Attempts to initiate transfers under altered authorization were documented. Internal flags confirmed the inconsistencies. The report did not accuse criminal intent. It recommended civil action. That recommendation carried weight. Veronica's access to several accounts was terminated permanently. She retained only what could be verified as independently hers. Everything else remained protected. She moved out quietly the following weekend. No scene. No confrontation. No goodbye. The apartment felt larger afterward. Cleaner. Not because she was gone, but because the tension had been removed completely. Julian's situation deteriorated faster. The licensing inquiry uncovered discrepancies unrelated to Veronica. Patterns emerged. Prior clients stepped forward. Audits expanded. What had once been quietly settled could no longer remain contained. By the end of the month, his firm dissolved. He did not contact me again. Veronica attempted one final message weeks later, sent through an unfamiliar email address. It was long. It explained motivations. It justified decisions. It requested closure. I forwarded it to my lawyer and did not respond. Closure does not come from dialogue when the damage was deliberate. It comes from stability returning. Professionally, nothing was lost. My employer confirmed all benefits were intact. My records were secured. My reputation remained unaffected. Financially, the outcome was clear. No assets were diverted. No liabilities were transferred. The attempt failed completely. Socially, the aftermath resolved itself without intervention. People chose distance. Conversations ended. Invitations stopped arriving. Veronica took contract work under a different firm within 3 months. The roles were short-term. The authority she once leveraged no longer followed her. I did not monitor her life after that. I did not need to. The night the Bluetooth speaker betrayed her was not an accident. It was the point where a plan designed to function in silence collided with reality. And reality does not negotiate once documentation exists.